Hello, physics class. This is Mr. Lightman. Quick video to show you a couple of really good features that Excel has that you will be using all year in physics and other science classes. In this quick video, I want to show you how to use Excel to perform calculations, how to make a good graph in Excel, and how to adjust the sig figs in cells on Excel and on a graph, specifically in the trend line equation. All right, let's get started. Here's some sample data from Lab 1.2 where we calculated the density of random samples of aluminum. Now there were 4 measurements made in the lab: length, width, height, and mass. And then the volume column are all calculated values, as well as the density column. You might be noticing there is one thing I would change in this student sample. We're missing units on length, width, and height. But I'll go ahead and tell you that the units are millimeters. Okay, translating. Anyway, inputting this information into Excel. I've already done that for us. Here's our sample column. Here's the length. Notice I added the units here. And then we're going to use Excel to calculate volume and density for us. You don't need to be using a calculator when Excel can do the calculations for you. All right, a couple things you might notice that are different. When they measured width, they did go to the 10th of a millimeter. So for instance, this measured value is 38.0. Excel is not showing it to us as 38.0. It, by default, doesn't put 0.0 if something is 0.0. So let's start adjusting sig figs. Right off the bat, I'm going to go ahead and select all of this data. And this button up here lets me increase the number of decimal places or decrease. We want to be consistent. They're all to the 10th place. So we're good there. Actually, I think this height might have been to the 100th place. Yes, it was. So we'll keep that like that. All right, now let's use Excel to calculate the volume. Every cell, that's what this little rectangle is called, acts as a calculator. To use it as a calculator, the first thing you need to do is hit the equal sign. Now, I'm going to let it multiply 40 times 24.9 times 3.25. I'm not going to type those values in. You just click the value, and then times, that's Shift 8, this value, times this value. Once I hit enter, it'll calculate that for me. Excellent. Instead of retyping that same formula into this cell here, Excel will notice the pattern. I'll click this one. In the bottom right, we'll call that the handle. You want to move the cursor until you'll see it changes from white to black. Once it turns black, now you can grab the handle. I'm holding it down, and if I drag it, boom. It noticed that we're just multiplying the 3 values to the left of each cell, and it does that automatically. Let's decrease our decimal places so that we are on the same amount of precision for each value. Just makes it easier to read and compare. All right, for my mass, those were entered in. Those look good. Now let's calculate density. When I go to calculate density, I need to divide mass by volume. Once again, start with an equal sign, click the mass, and then divided by, that's on the question mark key, the volume. Hit enter. A lot of digits of precision. We'll change that later. Once again, grab the handle, pull it down, and let's decrease our decimal places to, well, let's think about it. We're rounding for sig figs, and we want to reflect that. Notice that in these values, the least amount of sig figs was 3. Over here, the least amount of sig figs was actually 2 for this value, but 3 for the rest. I'm just going to round them all to 3 sig figs so that they're easy to read. Technically, I guess you'd round to 2 because of this one, but I think most people would leave it like this. All right, now what else do we want to calculate? Oh, we can let it calculate the average density for us. I'm going to type in average here so I know what the cell to the right is going to be. And now right here in this cell it's selected, I'm going to hit equals. I could add up these 5 values and divide by 5. Wait, did I go low enough? Yeah. I could add up those 5 values and divide by 5, but it's quicker to use Excel's built-in function. I'm just going to start typing the word average. Oh, right there, recently used. So if I type in the word average, anything I put in these parentheses, anything I put in those parentheses will be averaged. So I'm going to type in the word equals average, open parenthesis, drag over the 5 values I want, close parenthesis. Now when I hit enter, it will average the values for me. Ta-da. Okay, now let's get to graphing. The thing I want to graph, well, the instructions say create a graph such that the slope tells you density. Well, slope is rise over run. So for the rise, we want mass over the run of volume. So I'm going to graph mass and volume. Now they're not next, well, they are next to each other in this case. So I can just do this. If they weren't next to each other, I would select one column. I would hold down the command key and then select the other column. As long as I'm holding down the command key, I can select multiple columns. All right, let me hit escape to undo all that, or just click out of it, I guess. All right, so selecting these two columns. Anytime you want to graph data points, we're going to use a basic scatter plot. So choose scatter and choose the basic one. You don't connect the dots because that would make you think that there was more data than there actually is. All right. Now, did I get mass on top? Because that's what I wanted. Yes, mass is on the y-axis. So in this case, we're good. It doesn't always work out like that. Sometimes you might have your y values down here, and so you need to switch it, or it might have graphed the wrong values altogether. Here's what you do in that case. You control click. So I'm holding down the control button. When I click my data point, I have this menu of options. You can just choose right here, select data. That gives you the ability to go through and select your values. So for instance, the x values, I would click this button here. Now I can go over and drag over the x values I want. Well, I actually did want volume graph there, so I'll just reselect those, hit enter. Same thing with the y values. Enter again. Okay. We need to title it, so let's go ahead and add axis titles and a chart title. Oh, it's already there. Okay. And you would put your titles there. You would include, here we have volume. Oops, I made a mistake, didn't I? This is actually millimeters cubed. Volume in millimeters cubed. Over here we have mass, grams. And up here, what's a good title for this? I don't know. How about mass as a function of volume? For aluminum samples. All right, long title. Now, we want to use the slope of the trend line to tell us the density. I'm going to use my control click trick to bring up my menu. Control, click the data point, add a trend line. Other ways to do that, but that's a nice shortcut. We have all these different options. Sometimes we might have like a quadratic equation that a polynomial would fit better, or maybe an exponential equation. In this case, it should be a straight line, so linear is our best option. Now we have a few different things we can do. We can change how far the trend line goes. I like to project it backwards a little bit, or forwards. So that's nice. You also have the option to set intercept. In some cases, the intercept should not be set to 0. For instance, when we did the mass of the pennies, the intercept was not 0. The y-intercept told you the mass of the canister. In this case, though, if you imagine what would the mass of an aluminum sample be if the volume goes down to 0? Well, in that case, we don't have any aluminum and the mass would be 0. So I would say, yes, let's set the intercept for 0. Now we can display the equation on the chart. Here's my equation. It doesn't say plus 0 here, because Excel usually doesn't say plus 0. But yeah, that would be our y-intercept. Okay, now if we go back to our data, most of the data has 3 sig figs. So it's reasonable that we'd want this slope value to 3 sig figs. By default, it's only showing us 2 sig figs, the 2 and the 6. With the equation selected, I can adjust properties of the equation over here. See, trend line label. This menu allows me to change the type of number. If the number was a currency with a dollar sign, you could choose that. But in this case, it's just a regular old number. When you select number, it'll allow you to adjust the number of decimal places. Okay, so decimal places, it should be 0026 something. That's 5 decimal places. So we change this to 5, hit enter. Aha, before it just said 0.0026, but that was a rounded value. If we go to 5 decimal places, we see it's actually 0.00256. That's important for this lab. Okay, I think we're done there. All right, to recap, we've learned how to use Excel to calculate things for us. We've learned how to adjust the number of decimal places shown in a value. And we've learned how to graph data and adjust what data is being graphed, because it doesn't always graph it correctly for you. And we've learned how to adjust the decimal places in our trend line equation. All right, hope you found this video useful.